All right, today we're going to look at financial health. Financial health. And I'm excited about this message. As I looked into this, what I'm going to share with you today, I've entitled the message, Money See, Money Do. Now, obviously, I stole that or made it a variation from monkey see, monkey do, right? In fact, I got curious about that phrase, monkey see, monkey do, and I looked it up. I thought, wonder what that means. I know what it means, or I think I know what it means. But what was the original intent? It actually started in the 1920s. That phrase, monkey see, monkey do, started in the 1920s, and here's what it was intended to mean. The learning of a process without the understanding of why it works. That's what monkey see, monkey do originally meant. The learning of a process without understanding how it really works. And when I got that understanding, I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing because, I don't know about you, but in my life, when I've allowed God to get involved in my finances, I can't really determine how it's working. I just know it's working out. And the only factor that I know that's in there that is confusing my mind is the God factor. And so how appropriate that we probably entitle this message, Money See, Money Do, because the fact is, monkey see, monkey do is a learning process, and you don't know how it works out. It just works out. And so that's where we're at today. And I'm excited about sharing with you in this. The whole process that we've been in these last now, I guess it's 6 weeks, is renewing the mind. And the key verse that's kind of our basis for going through this whole process is Romans chapter 12, verse 2. It says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Can we say that together? Do not be conformed by the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The New Living Translation says, by changing the way you think. So this message today about financial health is not a message on giving. It's not a message about tithing. It's a message on addressing the way that we think about money and finances. Okay? That's what it is. It's how you think about money, how you think about material things. It's not whether you should or shouldn't give or how much you give or what you need to give. It's about how you think. So let's just jump in here. You have your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 16. We're going to be using a story, an illustration that Jesus gave his disciples that honestly is probably one of the most confusing parables in the Bible. Because it appears like that Jesus is commending dishonesty, but he's not. The person that was handling the money and the funds was, and that's not what he's commending. He's actually commending something else, and we'll discover what that is that he commends. The setting in Luke chapter 16 is that Jesus is teaching his disciples. That's how he starts out. He's teaching his disciples an aspect about how to see money and finances and how to handle it. But also, there's somebody listening, and they're called the Pharisees. And we'll discover at the end of this story, this illustration, that Jesus points out how the Pharisees thought about money that was different in the way that he was teaching his disciples to think about money and finances. So we're going to read this illustration, this story parable here in a few moments. But I want to start, first of all, with 4 things not to do with your money. And then we're going to look at 4 things that we need to do or ways to think about your money. 4 ways not to think about your money or not to do with. That's where we're going to begin. Jesus says in Luke 12:15, he says, be aware, don't be greedy for what you don't have. Real life is not measured by how much you own. The NIV says it this way, watch out and be on guard against all kinds of greed. A person's life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. And so Jesus is cutting in here really quick, giving us a warning about how we think, that depending upon how we think, whether it's godly or ungodly, it's going to bring about those kind of results. So here we go. Things not to do. First is don't waste it. Don't waste it. In Luke chapter 16, verse 1, Jesus is saying to his disciples that he says that when he starts out his story to the disciples, there was a rich man who was manager who was accused of wasting his possessions. So Jesus had, or the owner had a manager, and he ended up wasting his possessions. Now the guy, it doesn't say what he did, it doesn't say how he did it, just said he was wasting, and the manager caught wind of that, and he said, this guy's not going to manage my fund, he's not going to manage my fund, my farm, I don't know what he says, he's not going to manage the business anymore, I'm going to take him out. And so he is wasting the money. And so the first thing that we learn is with our material possessions is not to waste it. Now, I don't really know that anybody really intentionally tries to waste their money. But sometimes we end up doing certain things that it's a waste. I'm going to come out of the corner boxing this morning, all right? If you're playing the lottery, if you are trying to win the sweepstakes, if you are, you're just wasting your money. Honestly, you are. See, in your mind, you're thinking, mine's going to hit it. It's just, I don't know how much they cost. I've never played the lottery. So, but it's not much because I've watched people do it. They walk in and they buy that ticket and they scratch hoping that they're the winner. It's just a waste. I tell you what, here's another option. If you're playing the lottery, here's another option. Just give your money to me. And I'll find an incredible, great mission agency that can change lives with it. And you'll be accredited with more good than doing that. All right? So don't waste it. Number 2, don't love it. Don't love it. Let me back up here a little bit. No, I'm going to jump on here. I thought I missed a verse, but I didn't. So number 2, don't love it. Luke 16:13. Jesus says this. He says, no servant, again in the passage, no servant can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. How many of you have ever been in a setting where you've had to work for 2 bosses and both of them thought they had equal authority in your life? I see some hands up. Isn't that frustrating? When you go to work and you're one boss, you got 2 bosses, and your one boss comes in and says, I want you to do this project. And at break time in the morning, the other boss comes in and says, no, you need to do this project. Mine's more important. And at noontime, the first boss comes back and says, why aren't you doing my project? I thought I assigned you that. Because the other boss came in and said I needed to do this. Oh, okay, I need to do back the first boss. And then you get in the afternoon and the first boss coming back, why aren't my project done? Because the other boss told me to do that project. That's basically what you got if you're trying to serve God and money. You got 2 bosses that are trying to say they have the same authority into your life, and you're trying to give them both equal authority. And Jesus said that it might not work. He didn't say that once in a while you have a bad day if you try to do that. He said it cannot work. Period. It won't work. And so you and I have to realize, pretty strong language, but Jesus said, it won't work. It's impossible. He said you'll end up loving the one and despising the other. You know, I give messages on giving and tithing occasionally, and I always know the people the way that they're thinking about money, because the ones that are thinking like God about money, they love the messages. They're like, wow, that was powerful, Pastor, that was awesome. And the ones that run out the door quick are those that haven't renewed their mind about money. You see, we'll learn that God gave us money as a tool and even a test. We're going to learn here in a few moments. So he said, don't love it. Here's a passage out of 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10. People who want to get rich, let me start again. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap into making foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So if you find yourself loving money rather than God, just take a moment and meditate on that verse and see where it gets you. See if you want the results of loving money over loving God, and you can answer your own question to say, I don't want that kind of life. I want a life that is pleasing to God and gives me peace. Here's a third thing not to do. Don't trust it for security. Now we're getting into the soul stuff. Don't trust it for security. Proverbs 3, 4, and 5 says this, be wise enough not to wear yourself out trying to get rich. Your money can be gone in a flash as if it had grown wings and flown away like an eagle. Isn't that amazing? Do you realize that on the back of our dollar bill is an eagle? That should remind us that money flies away. It's printed on your bucks. That when you get it out and look at it, we should remind that there's an eagle printed on here and there's a reason it flies away. Pretty amazing, isn't it? And so we can't trust it for security. If your security is in a job, you can lose it. If your security is in health, it can fail you. If your security is in a spouse or a friend, they can leave you. If your security is in a 401k or an IRA or savings, they can get used up. Amen. Marriages fail because of money and mismanagement. You know, traditionally in the wedding vow, you stand up and you say, "Till death do us part," right? But when you mismanage money or don't think about money right, it ends up being till debt do us part instead of death. People part over money. Why is that? It's because they put their security in money. That's why. One or the other, or maybe both, have put their security there, and it's just not working. It's not lasting. And so they want to make sure that you want to make sure that your security is in the right place, the right person, not in something that won't ever bring security. Jesus says, listen, he said, I'm with you, I'll give you peace, I'll never leave you. That's security, isn't it? That's total security. Nobody's ever cracked the code from letting us not come to Jesus. And so we're here and we're understanding what it is to gain full security. The fourth thing not to do is to expect it to satisfy. All right? You don't want to expect money to satisfy you. Boy, this is a biggie, isn't it? Because this is how the world thinks. The world thinks it'll be your security, and the world thinks it will satisfy you. And so to renew our minds, we have to say, it's not going to satisfy me. It's nice if I have enough, but it's not going to satisfy me. And then the second aspect of that is that it can't be my security because it can be taken away. It can fly away like an eagle. Listen to 1 Timothy 6, verse 17. It says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Isn't that a great verse? A couple of verses to bring into reality of how we think. It's not understand, it's not the amount of money that you have. It's how you think about what you have. That's what we need to examine. It's not the amount, it's how we think about what we have. God is the one providing the enjoyment. He's the one providing the money. He's and so when you want money to satisfy you, then really the more you have, the more you want. That's kind of trailing out the thought. If you're thinking it's going to satisfy then the more you have, the more you want. And when you want money to satisfy you, it never ends, and it becomes a noose around your neck. of trying to get satisfied in something that won't. Listen to Ecclesiastes 5:10. It says, whoever loves money will never have enough. And whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. That's what Solomon said. And again, he was thinking like the world's thinking, trying to say it's ridiculous. Now let me give this isn't in your notes, let me give kind of the opposite of that in Proverbs 10:22. You might want to write this one down. Proverbs 10:22 says this, the blessing of the Lord establishes wealth, and difficulty does not accompany it. In other words, God prospers us to grow in wealth, and he adds no stress to it. So if you're all stressed out about the fact that God is adding more wealth to you, then you need to examine your thinking to say, where is my security? Where is my satisfaction? If it's truly in God, then the fact is we won't be stressed out about the fact that he's blessing us. But people do. They get stressed out about their blessing. Not that they don't have enough. Sometimes they got too much and they're stressed out. Where's God in the picture? So again, these are 4 ways that the way the world thinks about their finances, and God wants to renew our minds. So don't waste it, don't love it, don't think that it will satisfy, and it can't be your security. Now maybe you realize, wait a minute, I've thought that way. I'm thinking that way. What do? You begin to pull the weeds. That's really what you begin to do. You begin to pull the weeds, and then I'm going to give you some new things to plant here in a little bit in its place of how you think. As I get older, I have hair growing out of me in places that never grew before. We'll just stop there with the details. But what do? You pull it out. You pluck it out. You get rid of it as soon as you see it. You're like, it's never grown in that place before, but you're coming out, all right? Again, just a practical example of real life. That's what happens when we realize, hey, I'm thinking this way. This is not godly. I've got to pull it out and replace it and put something in its place. Now, here's something, before I leave this section, here's something that I think you need to be aware of. And that is when you buy into the world's view of money, without realizing it, you place yourself under the boss of mammon. And if you translate that scripture correctly, it shouldn't really be money. That's kind of a modern day example. It really should be mammon. Jesus says you cannot serve God and mammon. Now, let me just talk about that for a few moments. Mammon is a Greek god of materialism. And basically, that god convinces us that money's your security, money can satisfy you, and you can waste it and it doesn't matter. And that you can just, do as the world does, and you're going to be fine. That's what mammon tries to convince us. I dug out a few other things that can happen to us, and this might get close to home or close to your heart. When you're under the boss of mammon, you begin to, inadvertently, you get, it's not just that you have a continual lust for more. Here's some other things that happen to you. When you envy others because of their wealth, then you know you're under the influence of mammon. When you envy other people that have more than you, you're under the influence of the boss of mammon. When you're anxious over a potentially unmet need, you don't have an unmet need, but you're anxious over the fact that it could potentially be unmet, you're under the boss of mammon. When you disobey God's directives about the use of your wealth, you're under the boss of mammon. And when you fail to trust God and allow him to show you how to use your wealth to bless him, you're under the boss of mammon. When you're under the boss of mammon, it basically connects us to the world's view of money. And that's not how God wants us to live. That's not what gives us freedom. That's not what gives us blessing and peace in this life. And so now we're going to look at 4 ways to view our money. We're going to plant some new seeds here this morning into your life and in financial health. So first of all, I'll start out with Proverbs 3:9. And the first part of that verse says, honor the Lord with your wealth. So the first thing he wants us to do is to honor him with it. And here's how we do that. we start with this. It all belongs to God. If you want to begin to learn to be financially healthy and what to do with your material wealth that God has given you, the begin place for you and I is it all belongs to God. It all belongs to God. That is the starting place. And so when we look at this particular parable we'll get into in a few moments, this manager thought that some of it belonged to him. And that's why the boss, the owner, began to hear back, wait a minute, this manager is wasting your money. He's not representing you well. He is not, you need to get rid of him. You need to come back. And so the owner is coming back, addressing the manager's mismanagement or waste into him. He thought that some belonged to him. He thought that he could do with it whatever he wanted to and the boss would be okay. But the boss was not okay. He said, that's not how I intended it to be. That's not how I prescribed it to be. Therefore, I'm going to come and I'm going to take you out. It may be Wednesday and Friday's coming. His day is done. And so we're going to learn what happened and how he responded to that. And actually, Jesus commended this dishonest manager. Again, he's not commending dishonesty. Again, we'll look at what he does. I'm just getting you prepared here. So we don't own anything. It's all on loan from God. We don't own. It's all on loan. That's how we should begin to look at materialism. It's all on loan. Somebody had it before us. Somebody was living in the house before we bought it. Somebody will live in the house after we cross over to the other side. Somebody had money before you were born. Somebody's going to have money after you. It's all on loan. It really is. That's how we should begin to think. But God, you've entrusted me with an amount. How do you want me to spend it? How do you want me to allocate it? That should be our thought. When you get your paycheck, whether it's every week or every 3 weeks or every month or once a year, I don't know when you get your paycheck. But the fact is, when you get it, do you routinely say, thank God, this is awesome, God, this is yours, you gave it to me, now how do you want me to spend it? God says, start with paying your bills on time. You know, the fact is that God has a directive, and so we should be grateful when we receive funds and finances and say, God, this belongs to you, now how do you want me to spend it? You know, there's an amazing thing that happens when you transition over to that, when you don't own anything, and God owns it all. Basically, everything you have is His. And so if something breaks, then you say, okay, God, this broke. What do you want me to do about it? And He says, take it to this person, get it fixed. Okay. Thank you, God. God, I lost my job. What do you want me to do about it? It was your job that you gave me, and I lost that job. Now, where are you going to open up the next door? See, if we begin to think like that, it'll change. Man, you live in a breeze. It's not your job anymore. It's not your car anymore. It's not your house anymore. It's not not the things that you enjoy. They're all God's, and God's given to you to enjoy, not to stress out over. So when it all belongs to Him, we just settle it. Say, oh, wow, I can live that way? Yes, you can live that way. That's what it means to be a part of the kingdom. The second thing is, again, we're planting new seeds in the way we think about money and finances. God gives us wealth as a test. He gives us wealth as a test. Look at 10 through 12. Chapter 16 of Luke, 10 through 12. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with very much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? It's a test. God gives us money and possessions to see how we're going to handle it. And the mistake that we make is thinking, I have so little. What I could give won't make any difference there. Let me tell you, most of the nonprofit organizations that if I would start naming and you would know them, most of those thrive off of gifts of $35 to $40 to $45 to $50 a month. Most of them thrive. They don't thrive off of big donors getting their windfall and giving off of that. They thrive off of people like you and me that have an extra 20 or have an extra 30, that we appreciate that nonprofit and what they do, a radio station, and we give consistently $20 or $30 a month, and they thrive. Because we're not in the place of having the windfall. We're not in the place where we have a lot. And the mistake that we begin to think is that my little bit won't make a difference. See, God dealt with me about 10 years ago in this regard. Because I was making mission pledges, and I would make a big pledge. Because I was challenged and I wanted to grow in faith, and I would make a big pledge. And I would get to the end of the year and I would not have the money to pay it. And I would go into guilt, and I would go into, oh man, I made this big pledge and I was all in faith. I was waiting for the windfall to come, and it never came. And I remember the moment that God dealt with me on that. And he said this. He said, can you spare an extra 10 a month? I said, sure, God, I can do that. He said, you start there and you give 10 a month. And you knew at the end of the year, you multiply that by 12 and see where you're at. Oh God, that's $120. Wow. Then he said, next year he said, can you spare $20? Sure, God, I can increase it by 10. And he said, you multiply that by 12 and you see what you get. Next year he said, can you spare, sure, God, because you blessed me, I can spare 30. And he began to walk me through a process, but I had to start small. And this is exactly what Jesus is teaching. It's red letter stuff. He said, you had to start small, and I had to determine that small amount makes a difference. And then he says, I can trust you with more. But if we never start small, and that's what the world tells us, the world says that you wait for your windfall, you wait for your lottery, and then you give. That's not healthy thinking. You start small, and then God increases as you go. So it's a test. How you handle money determines three things. It determines what you love the most. Determines what you love the most. Where you place your extra money. Obviously, we have bills and things we need to take care of. That's already a given. But where you place your extra money, it really determines what you love the most. Matthew 6 says that where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. And so, I heard many years people would say, well, look where your heart is, there's your treasure. The opposite is true. If you start putting money into something, your heart will go there. It will. I could care less about George Mason University before my son went there. I didn't even know it was on the map. I didn't know what kind of school. I could care less. But now my son's going there, and he's on the ultimate Frisbee team, and they're winning, and I'm like, yay, George Mason. What's happening to my heart? My heart that didn't care a lick about George Mason suddenly is in there. See what happens? Whatever you put money into, your heart will go into. It's not first examining your heart to see where your money's at. It works that way too. That's financial health. What I trust, here's the second thing, how I handle money. It reveals what I trust the most. It reveals what I trust the most. Now again, not intentionally that we waste money, but it does really make us examine what are we trusting. Because you think about it, when you put your money someplace, you buy something, you're inadvertently trusting that what you're buying or what you're getting is good value. Is that not true? You think that it's going to value you in some way. You appreciate it, and so you put your money there or you buy that certain thing. If you wake up one day and think, wait a minute, that's a waste, you've changed value and you'll change money. You won't put your money there anymore because you changed value. If you have a good mechanic and that mechanic is working well for you, and then one day they just mess things up royally and cost you a bunch, you won't go back there because the value's not the same generally. See, we change. We put trust in what we buy, and we change. It reveals what we love. It reveals what we trust. And the third thing, this is probably the more critical thing, how you handle money determines whether God can trust me. Soak on that one a while. It determines whether God can trust me. Verse 11 and 12. Let me just read it again. Jesus is teaching his disciples. He says, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? It determines whether or not Jesus can trust you. See, if you have out of control finances, why would Jesus give you more money? If your finances are not in order, then why would he give you more? That doesn't make sense to me. Even as an owner and the manager was wasting the money. And so the owner's coming and he's going to take him out. He says, no, you're not handling this the way it should be handled. Therefore, you're out of here. And so in our minds, if we don't have our finances in order, why would Jesus bring the windfall to us? That would mess us up worse. Seriously. And so we have to realize that we're in this test. And as being in this test, whether God can trust me in the process. Now, number 3, again, we're planting seeds. Money is a tool to be used for God's purposes. Money is a tool to be used for God's purposes. Let me share with you this really interesting verse in verse 9. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. What is that? See, God says that your money, which I think the first point is, it's a temporary resource for a permanent good. See, you actually can give money, and as a result of that, you can actually see lives change. It's not because you gave money, but it's how those people were able to be reached because of the money that you gave that has a permanent, eternal result. Are you getting that? That's a proper perspective of saying it's not the money that you give, but it's what it means. It's what it's valued, that when you put it in, that lives are being changed and lives are being brought to Christ. In fact, people are experiencing heaven because of what you're giving and sharing. That's a perspective that, again, that we should have in financial health. Money is a tool to be used for God's purposes. I think I remember years ago, Teresa and a group of them, they just decided that on a hot day they were going to take water bottles and put a label around Crossroads, and they were going to go out in the neighborhood and see construction workers and anybody that was just hot, give them a bottle of water and say, God loves you. Now, obviously, it took money to buy the water. But the value of giving that water away to those people that were hot and hearing God loves you, that's an eternal saying that went into their soul. Wow, he does love me. He showed up on a hot day with a bottle of water. So that's a product that our money should be used for a permanent good. The manager got fired. And this is what Jesus commends him for. Let's kind of look at this story. I'm going to start again in verse 1 and read through verse 8. Let's join there. There was a rich manager. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can no longer be my manager. The manager said to him, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. He'd grown fat. And I'm ashamed to beg. And so he's like, people can't know that I'm out of work. Verse 4, I know what I'll do. He said, so when I lose my job, it's Wednesday and Friday's coming. That's his last day. I'll lose my job here. People will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He still had the job. He still had the authority and the position. And he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. He cut it in half. Verse 7, then he said to the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. And he told him, take your bill and cut it to 800. He cut off 20%. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than people of the light. What's Jesus saying there? He's saying that oftentimes people in the world have their finances together more than people in the church. That shouldn't be. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be. Perhaps we are trying to live in two kingdoms at the same time. Perhaps we're trying to live as the world lives with their finances, and yet we're in another kingdom. And it's clashing and crashing. And so Jesus commends this manager, this fired manager, for three things. Number one, what did he do? Verse 3, he looked ahead. He looked ahead. You see, most of us are just looking in the moment. But if you realize my finances are a mess, and start looking ahead and say, where's that going to get me in a year? Where's that going to get me in 2 years? Where's that going to get me in 3 years? If I don't do something today, what's going to happen? See, it's not living by faith just to live paycheck to paycheck. I bought into that lie for about 10 years. I thought to live by faith was to live paycheck to paycheck. That's not true. I bought into a lie. Again, it's some of the things that come into the church that we need to shred and we need to plant new. So he looked ahead. The manager said to himself, what shall I do? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. And so the next thing he did is he made a plan. He not only looked ahead, but he made a plan. He said, I know what I'll do. I'm going to lose my job on Friday, therefore. He called in the debtors. He still had the authority. He said, okay, cut it in half. The other one, knock off 20%. So he looked ahead and he made a plan. The third thing he did, he acted quickly. He acted quickly. See, the word shrewd means to be smart, to be resourceful, to be have a strategy. That's what it means to be shrewd. And that's what Jesus commended this guy for, his shrewdness. He acted quickly. And then he got the results. So as soon as he had a plan, he started working. He started realizing, my time's up here, therefore I'm going to make plans for my future. And so if you're at a place, this is what's going to happen this week in your Transform groups, is that Pastor Rick is going to teach you about a simple plan, again, to start with where you're at and begin to work out of maybe the mess that you're in if you're in a mess. It's a very simple plan that he'll lay out that those of you that have accomplished it, well, we've got some more power here. Those of you that have accomplished it, you'll go, yeah, that works. And those of you that haven't yet, they'll say, well, I need to get in. So again, that's what's going to happen in your Transform group this week. The best use of money, here's my conclusion on point 3. The best use of money is helping people experience heaven. Have you thought about that before? Have people experience heaven. You own a nice car, you give them a ride. You live in a nice house, you invite people over. You have extra, you go out to lunch. You have the ability, you take people along and say, come along with me. What do you experience? You're sharing the goodness of what God has given you to bless others. What are they doing? They're experiencing part of heaven today. And so that's how we need to begin to think in our understanding about our use of money in materials. Verse 9 is the one that kind of sums that up, about using worldly wealth to gain friends. How many people are going to be in heaven because of you? Because of your sharing of your wealth that God has given you? That's the question. Number 4, how I direct money in my life, I am accountable for. How I direct money in my life, I am accountable for. Let me finish up the end of this parable here in Luke 16:14. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. And he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in who? In the eyes of men. But God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. Jesus just zeroed in on these Pharisees that were making fun of this illustration of how we think about money and possessions, because their heart was, in a sense, in the world and not in the kingdom. And you and I can inadvertently just not filter out how we've been taught in the world in which we live in order to renew our minds to get in the kingdom. what am I doing now? So the question that we should ask ourselves is, what am I doing now with what I have? That's really the question. What am I doing now with what I have been given? That's really the question. As your money grows, your influence grows. Do you realize that? As your money grows, your influence grows. Why, politically, people say, well, we need to tax the rich. Well, that's the wrong thing to do, folks, because the rich people give us jobs. And nobody's saying that. Everybody says tax the rich, and we go, yeah, tax the rich. The fact is the rich people give us jobs. So if you tax the rich people are going to go out of business because you're taxing them too much and you're not going to have a job. The politicians don't say that. Sorry to get political this morning, but that's a fact. And so we need to realize that as your money grows, your influence will grow. It'll grow in a positive way or grow in a negative way. Again, depending upon how we manage that and use that. Rick Warren gives this illustration. Many of you know he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. And that book became the #1 seller around the world for I don't know how many years. It's been translated now in 5 or 6 languages. And he said, honestly, the money that came in from the sale of that book, he said, I could have purchased a small nation and went and lived there for the rest of my life, drinking orange julius. That's my addition, not his. But what did he do with that? See, he had a 20-year track record with God of being faithful with the little. And he was faithful. And then after 20 years, he wrote that book. And it was a windfall that came. The first thing he did is he paid back to the church every salary that was ever given to him. He paid back the church. And the second thing he does now is that he lives off of 9% of his income. He doesn't take a salary now. He lives off of 9% income, and he gives away 91%. And he testifies to say, I couldn't have done that if I didn't have a 20-year track record of being faithful with the little and letting the little grow. I would not have been faithful to do that. He examined himself to say, I wouldn't have handled it well if I didn't have that track record. And God saw that. He saw into his heart. And you see, God sees into your heart and my heart. You say, well, I'd love to be somebody like Rick. Well, maybe you can, or maybe you will. But you will never get there and keep your life together if you don't start being faithful with what you got. If you don't realize that your little bit makes a difference in God's eyes. If you don't begin to grow that seed, then you'll never get to the place of having abundance and influencing many. So, kind of a sobering message, but a good one, right? Because there's hope. Amen? So again, just to summarize here. Am I wasting? Am I loving? Am I expecting it to satisfy? Am I expecting it to be my security? Maybe you're here today and you say, wow, I need a weed that needs to be pulled from my life. Just confess it to God. You know, in the Old Testament, when they confessed, they tore their clothes off. Let's not do that here. But they were pretty serious about their confession. That's pretty serious, isn't it? Literally, they did. They went there confessing to God. They ripped their clothes off. Let's not, again, do that here. We're in New Testament times. But just confess it to God. God, I believe that. And then secondly, that we need to, maybe you're here and you just need to, again, go back and say, God, you own it all. Maybe that's what you need to declare today. God, I'm ready to enter into your test. I have not been faithful with little. God, show me how to be faithful with little. Maybe that's the place that you're at. And maybe that's a place where you say, you know what, I've not seen money as something that can have eternal good. I've not seen money as something that could have eternal good. I could share it with others and give them a little bit of heaven. Maybe that's the transition that you need this morning. How do you do that? You look ahead. You make a plan, and you act quickly. You act quickly. And then you say, God, I'm ready to be accountable with my finances. Because, you know, if you don't start being accountable with your own finances, the world will hold you accountable. They will. And they're not scared about it. They'll send you collection agencies and, you know, lawyers and papers. They're not bashful about it. And so as we hold ourselves accountable and we begin to seed it God's way, then we will have financial health and blessing and a whole lot less stress in our lives. Let's pray. Father, thank you for just showing us how to renew our minds in the area of finances. And Lord, I pray there's no condemnation in this place that's been shared already this morning in the service. And Lord, today I pray that we would examine our hearts and know that you are a loving Father, that you are a God that owns everything, but you are also the boss. You're the owner. And so you desire to have us learn how to govern, how to manage that which you have entrusted us with. And I pray, God, that we would just take this time to examine our lives and say, Lord, if there's anything in me in regards to how I'm viewing finances, if there's anything in me that is offensive to you, God, I want to pull it out today. And Father, I want to plant in my life what it means to see things the way you see things in regards to finances and security. And so, Lord, we come today and we bring ourselves before you for an examination, not for condemnation, but for freedom. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.